creation and jobs. This dialogue, ladies and gentlemen, this morning will highlight achievements from key reforms, focusing on salient issues and challenges met along the way. This occasion also reflects on achievements of respected citizens in Africa, and in the case of Uganda, informs government's efforts, including, but not to mention, of course, Operation Wealth Creation. Ladies and gentlemen, to begin a conversation around this very first or inaugural Tumusiime Mutebile Center for Excellence Business Dialogue, allow me to invite the Executive Director, Makerere University Private Sector Forum, Professor Nuha Mwesigwa, to address you. Thank you very much.
The Right Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Hassan Aragunda, our keynote speaker, Dr. Donald Kaberuka, the Governor Bank of Uganda, Professor Emmanuel Tumusiime Mutebile, distinguished personalities here present, all protocol observed. You're all most welcome to this very important occasion in the history of Makerere University Press Sector Forum, but more important in the history of Professor Emmanuel Tumusiime Mutebile. Mr. Prime Minister, sir, Makerere University Private Sector Forum and Bank of Uganda take pride today to organize the Tumusiime Mutebile Center Business Dialogue in Kampala, the first of its kind. This dialogue is specifically called to find transformative and alternative solutions needed for growing a vibrant and sustainable private sector in Uganda with a regional and global focus, targeting to create wealth and jobs in this country. You may have received the background of the theme, which reads as 3 decades of economic reforms in Uganda, with particular attention building base for wealth creation and jobs. The strategic objectives of this dialogue today is, one, to provide the basis of a continued dialogue on what is needed to bridge the disconnect that is probably delaying wealth creation and jobs, with particular focus on policy and practice in view of emerging national, regional, and global challenges and opportunities. Secondly, we're here to bring into focus the Tumusiime Mutebile Center of Excellence strategy for private sector transformation through, in his vision, run executive programs, entrepreneurial training, and capacity development for quality, productivity, and to assist the local companies or enterprises to go global. And 3, we're here to level ground or a foundation for the Tumusiime Mutebile Center of Excellence at Makerere University, where he was honored, as a new hub, convening synergies, and a new think tank for innovative, transformative, and alternative solutions for private sector capacity development and growth, to increase choices and opportunity for income in this country, employment, and wealth creation. Mr. Prime Minister, sir, ladies and gentlemen, to be able to proceed, I take the honor to read the profile in style of Tumusiime Mutebile and how he relates to this Center of Excellence, and possibly to explain what could have trickled Makerere University to honor him different from others. Key focus issues in line with the objectives above mentioned: we need to understand and appreciate what gave rise to the vision and focus of this dialogue we are running today. 1, we need to understand and appreciate the person and character of Professor Emmanuel Tumusiime Mutebile in relation to the Center of Excellence, and 2, to have a key reflection of the economy of Uganda relative to his contribution in the last 3 decades. 3 is to look at the Center of Excellence relative to regional and Africa-based challenges. A question to pose to ourselves that probably should be answered as we sit here is that, looking at the person and character of Professor Tumusiime Mutebile, how do we harness the name, the person, the character, and the potential of his network to answer questions of Uganda's economy? To how do we rally Tumusiime Mutebile potential for mobilizing his network to bridge the disconnect between policy and practice? We have tracked record of Tumusiime Mutebile as governor, as person, as an intellectual, as an achiever, and as a leader of difference. Indeed, if I may quote one of his close allies, probably seated before us, has described Tumusiime Mutebile for being renowned for his frankness, for his professionalism, and for his management style. These are personal traits that are not essentially friendly to an African socio-political economy which is largely weaved around the character of a state. The rare but envied qualities of Tumusiime Mutebile has and will permeate through characteristics of the Center of Excellence with him today and the life after. Looking at Tumusiime Mutebile's frankness and professionalism, as you are aware, and you should possibly agree with me, all of us seated here, we all claim to speak the truth time and again. Paradoxically, not many of us walk by the truth, as has been with the case of Tumusiime Mutebile. Yet the truth that it is yet the truth that sets humanity free. Professor Tumsime Mutebile has proved himself over and over again in that regard. For instance, if I may go a little back, with regard to his frankness and professionalism, it has earned him a distinguished service in government and in the international community. His unchallenged intellectual standing has earned him distinguished professorial honors in the world of academics and central banks in Africa. Therefore, I want to add that unless Africa and the African people turn out to tell the truth to themselves and to others and to walk by it, it will not be free from its problems. Tumsime's management style is on record for his governance style that demonstrates qualities of a persistent and consistent manager. The achievements and success in positions he has served give a rich experience and to emulate, promote, and inculcate Tumsime Mutebile's qualities in future generational leadership. Put differently, we have a great person in the character and professional excellence who deserves a lasting remembrance. Professor Tumsime Mutebile has unlimited accord that makes him an icon on the national, regional, and international arena. He has distinguished himself with professional awards in public service, awards in diplomatic and international awards. He has distinguished awards in socio-economic transformation and awards of achievers, among others, not to mention now. Tumsime Mutebile's network that we all would wish to access to explains many things to us. Arising from his experience, Tumsime Mutebile's profile shows his interface with notable organizations and personalities globally. There is no richer network that presents an opportunity for mobilizing resources in terms of human beings, in terms of funding, in terms of networking, in terms of building ourselves, if we go by his trade. Regarding the Uganda economy, I want to pose a question to our minds that can we use this golden opportunity that has presented itself to us to radiate knowledge, skills, and technology as a homegrown solution and address regional and Africa-based challenges? To what extent should we tap this resource, meaning Tumsime Mutebile? Can we therefore embrace Tumsime Mutebile's Center of Excellence as a vehicle and a method of providing transformative and alternative solutions needed to drive Uganda's economy? On the regional and Africa challenges, how do we use the two above to build a society that demonstrates frankness and professionalism? How do we do the same to develop an exceptional center of excellence that is coming up at Makerere University as a hub of innovations, homegrown research, information, advisory services, and to develop capacity of the present and the future leaders. Mr. Prime Minister, sir, African leaders, African development requires holistic institutions, infrastructure, and integration on many fronts. We need correct thinking, creativity, knowledge management skills, information flow, set systems and policy. We need focused research, innovations, leadership guidance, and best practices of governance and accountability if our society should or must change. There is need for, indeed, a homegrown think tank which is African resourced to engineer African solutions decisively as compared to time and again importing experts from the rest of the world to come home, not only to guide us in their interests, but also to go away with our resources. Here we have Tumusiime Mutebile, and many of them could exist through him, Mr. Prime Minister. This explains the importance of Tumusiime Mutebile. This center is intended to guide private sector growth in Uganda and Greater East Africa if we have to take a regional and Africa focus. The center should critically examine African practices with the view of projecting African perspectives as the basis to engineer African solutions. The center, as a think tank, will address itself to the outcry of African people to be able to manage our economies differently in line with our culture, our belief, our conditions to create wealth and jobs. Many times, Mr. Prime Minister, sir, we have been twisted to go by the Western thinking, forgetting that the economies are 200, 300 years old, and ours are hardly 30 or 50 years. And therefore it's important, Mr. Prime Minister and your government, to back up this line of thinking and see how we can use our own sons to run our own things as we think, as we want to move. Mr. Prime Minister, sir, you very well know that Uganda is grappling with high unemployment level, population explosion, high urbanization rate, poverty and vulnerability, lack of performing institutions, struggling for regional integration, inadequate infrastructure, and others that may be considered minor but yet significant challenges at national and regional level. As I conclude, Mr. Prime Minister, sir, we need the Tumusiime Mutebile Center to focus on speaking to these, and hence the entry point is today and now. Let's have our own think tank here. We have men and women who can do that. We therefore come to you, Mr. Prime Minister, sir, and the members seated here, bring to you the Center of Excellence whose task will be to complement government efforts and develop development partners in place. The center targets to benefit Uganda and the regional bloc, such as COMESA, ECOWAS, the East African Community, in many different ways. The solutions generated by Tumusiime Mutebile Center today will be replicated to other countries in Africa and beyond, hence Uganda taking lead as a hub. Mr. Prime Minister, sir, I thank you for accepting my presentation. Mr. Predecessor, our keynote speaker, ladies and gentlemen, I take this opportunity and honor to invite the Governor, Professor Emmanuel Mutebile, who is also the chairman of Makerere University Private Sector Forum, a founding father of the same, in collaboration with a team from Makerere, to come and give his opening and welcome remarks.
Yeah, yes,
The Right Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Rakana Rugunda, our keynote speaker, Dr. Donald Kaberuka, the Deputy Governor of the Bank of Uganda, Dr. Miska Sekende, colleagues and friends, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all to this very important business dialogue, which is designed to forge ways of building the base for wealth creation and jobs for our people and society at large. This presents an opportunity and a challenge to ask ourselves frank questions as we attempt to focus on alternative directions for Africa's socio-economic transformation, beginning with Uganda. Key to note is that the Makerere University Private Sector Forum pioneered the path of bridging the gap between academia and public and private sectors. The forum has moved an extra mile with the setting up of the Mutebile Center of Excellence, which was first mooted in a decision of the Council to give me the opportunity to establish this center. It's a new hub for providing transformative and alternative solutions for private sector growth and employment creation. We are here to discuss what the center offers to the promotion of African solutions to African problems. As you may all be aware, Uganda was in the vanguard of economic reforms during the late 1980s, early 1990s. I want to appreciate Dr. Kaberuka, who is here with us, with whom I share the conviction that these reforms, though tough at the beginning, created the conditions for effective transformation. Indeed, the private sector flourished, the economy grew stronger and stronger year after year, and we saw very strong economic growth year after year. Economic growth and development. However, population growth became a problem, and limited sets of economic growth drivers still require a step change in order to create jobs and wealth. Please let us work together to build a strong, vibrant, and sustainable private sector, increase choices and opportunity for income, employment, and wealth. In a special way, I welcome Dr. Donald Kaberuka, our keynote speaker, to this dialogue. Let me take this opportunity to invite Dr. Rwakana Rugunda, the Right Honorable Prime Minister, to give his address. Thank you, sir. Okay.
Dr. Donald Kaberuka, our keynote speaker, Professor Emmanuel Mutebile, macroeconomic stability, a role he has diligently played for the last 3 decades. During the most difficult economic times, Mutebile has been critical in stabilizing the troubled waters. I must say, political stability is a real base for economic development. Over the years, the government has worked and achieved political stability, and no wonder the poverty numbers have significantly reduced. Most interesting to note is the regained peace in northern Uganda. And this peace in northern Uganda has advantage and favorable prices to double their crop income. To Mutebile's contribution to defining the current economic growth strategy of liberalization, diversification, industrialization, regional integration cannot be underestimated. This growth strategy is beginning to pay off. The country has diversified its export from predominantly coffee, cotton, copper and tea, copper in the past, and hopefully in the future. And currently, on top of these, it is vigorously promoting tourism, fish, mineral, and many other potentials for the export market. Our growth trajectory over the years has led to an expanded tax base. For instance, Uganda is now able to finance 70% of its budget through domestic revenue compared to when managed at least in 1996. The expansion in domestic revenue has enabled government to finance critical areas for economic takeoff, such as energy and road infrastructure. Equally important, it has also expanded government latitude to borrow to meet its budgetary obligations. On the side of structural transformation of the economy, Uganda's pace has been relatively strong compared to its regional peers. This is illustrated by the changing patterns of production and employment. The share of agriculture in total gross value added nearly halved, and in about 20% in 20 of the sector increased in 1990 to 49%, 15, converting it. In contrast, the industrial sector as a whole, which includes mining, utilities, and construction, as well as manufacturing, has only seen a modest increase in its share of GDP from about 11% in 1990 to 20% in 2015. Between the year 2000 and 2014, the contribution of manufacturing to GDP growth has amounted to just 8%, compared to 30% related to other activities. In short, manufacturing's contribution to overall growth has been modest at best. Government is committed to revamping this sector of industrialization. I better also mention that Uganda recently adopted and is implementing the internationally agreed Sustainable Development Goals. The country has gone mainstream SDGs targets into its national and frameworks. We hope achieving these SDG targets will pull many more of our people. So, as I conclude these remarks, ladies and gentlemen, I am happy with the focus of this Center of Excellence, which is to drive transformation and educating the next generation of leaders and entrepreneurs. This will call for deliberate collaboration of academia, public and private sectors to support growth of entrepreneurship ecosystems, in which education is indeed a key driver. Let us work together and through this center as a convening power and think tank for providing transformative solutions for the growth and development of this country. Noah, in his remarks, made quite, in my view, accurate and appropriate remarks. Ndugu Tumusime Mutebile, as a childhood friend of Tumusime, I'll better say one or two additions, because we have known each other for quite a bit of time, since the 50s, when we were students at Kigezi High School Primary. Tumusiime made his mark actually during his early days, because when he was a student, especially when he was at Makerere University, he became a very significant journalist. I say journalist here, but I remember Tumusiime capturing lead stories under his name in the then The People, which was quite a powerful paper at that time. So, apart from being an academic and a thinker and a manager, he has got very many skills as a journalist. You just need to do some little research and see the headlines in the late 60s, early 70s. Tumusiime Mutebile's name would be common as the author of many of those articles. Tumusiime Mutebile has also been a student leader. Those of us who were at Makerere, and I'm looking around, it's difficult to see many, remember the famous campaign that figured many people, but especially Tumusiime Mutebile and Eric Karuhanga. Eric Karuhanga is a respected lawyer in town and quite a powerful entrepreneur. That, like the American campaigns and more recent Ugandan campaigns, it required the candidates to go to the national television and articulate your points while the Makerere students were watching and the country was watching. And after that debate, which was, I must say, I will not go into the details of the debate, elections came and Tumusiime Mutebile won that hotly contested race. This was not an easy period because it was the time when Idi Amin was in charge. And either you conformed and worked with him. If he suspected that you had a contrary view, you'd be in trouble. It is therefore not surprising that Tumusiime Mutebile had a contrary view and was therefore in trouble with Idi Amin. And a few friends at Makerere, including the famous Lady Sarantiro, then at Makerere, had to organize for Tumusiime's departure and escape for his life. I'm glad that he used that period to advance his training in economics at Durham University and at Oxford, and was able to return soon to Uganda. But before coming to Uganda, he spent some bit of time teaching economics at the University of Dar es Salaam. I think the last point I want to make about Tumusiime here is that we are not benefiting optimally as governments from the technical people. Because sometimes a technical person has a great point, he or she brings it up, and you may brush it aside, or you may not quite comprehend it, and that ends the story. That good idea from the technical person may die because there hasn't been adequate environment rapport established to absorb such great ideas. So, in 1986, after capturing power, many of us were young, many of us were not extremely friendly to IMF and even the World Bank, because we looked at these institutions as instruments of oppression. So we carried out some measures which we thought were the right measures to take to revamp our economy. But as we carried out those measures, instead of the economy improving, the economy went down. Inflation shot up. I think it reached in the range of 200 to 300%. So one voice out and said, in my view, the direction we are taking will not save the country. The direction we should take is this. So we wondered whether this friend who was talking about policies close to the World Bank and IMF was really okay with us, or whether there was anyway. But instead of dismissing him because he had contrary views, government decided to listen to him, because we also knew that he had good credentials as a strong patriot. Eventually, after long debates over many meetings, government agreed that barter trade may not be the solution to some of our problems. Or revaluation of the Uganda shilling may not be, after all, the solution when inflation was shooting up so much. And government accepted this lonely voice and embarked on radical economic reforms, which a number of you either know about or have at least read about. And that lonely voice, which was able, after many meetings, and very hot meetings by the way, to persuade government to take the line of reforms, economic reforms, was the voice of Tumusiime Mutebile. So I want to salute him for his patriotism, love for his country, and for his integrity to oppose the powers that be that Noah was talking about in government, because he knew that what he was talking about, what he was proposing, was good for the country. And indeed, that typifies what Tumusiime Mutebile, or who Tumusiime Mutebile is. Being straight, being frank, and being consistent with his views, which really have been tested in many ways. Therefore, the establishment of this Center of Excellence, and I salute Makerere University, I am confident will add value to the process of microscopic examination of our economic policies, with that the country undertakes will be responsive to the challenges, unemployment, and many other issues. So, looking with high expectations, because it has the ability to bring government, the private sector together, and the academia together. Quite often, our good ideas have not had synchrony. We have not been able to bring them together in order to come up with really good solutions. I think this center is likely to fix that gap that may have been existing in our country. So with these remarks, I declare open to Tumusiime Mutebile Center business dialogue. And I thank you.
The Right Honorable Prime Minister, we want to thank you so much for opening the dialogue and for your remarks this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to invite our keynote speaker. And I've been given a pamphlet of his profile, so you will bear with me. I will pick a couple of things and summarize it. I'll try and summarize this. I am sure he wouldn't want me to share his age, so I'll stay away from when he was born. Our keynote speaker this morning has worked in the banking and international trade, and as early as 1997 he was appointed Minister of Finance and Economic Planning in Rwanda. He served in that position for 8 years and is credited with helping stabilize the Rwandan economy from the effects of the 1994 genocide. In July 2005, he was elected president of the African Development Bank and took office in September 2005. While at the bank, he also led an institution whose financial standing has now been restored of 1995. In addition to his role at the bank, our keynote speaker was also a member of the Commission on Effective Development Cooperation with Africa, set up by the Danish Prime Minister Anders Rasmussen in 2008. Fast forward, and I think he would be happy for me to do this, to October 2015, where he joined the Africa Leadership University as the Chair of the Advisory Council. In November 2015, the Rockefeller Foundation also appointed him on its board of trustees, and in the same year, in December, he was appointed senior advisor to the consortium TPG Satya, jointly owned by two private equity firms, the US-based TPG and the London-based Satya Capital, affiliated to Sudanese billionaire Mo Ibrahim. To date, he is the member of the Leadership Council of Harvard J.F. Kennedy School Center for Public Leadership, and is also the current Africa Union High Representative for the AU Peace Fund. In early 2017, he became a senior advisor to the public sector, social impact and financial institutions practices at the Boston Consulting Group in the US. And also in 2017, he was announced joint chair of the London School of Economics Oxford Commission on State Fragility, Growth and Development under the auspices of the International Growth Centre, alongside the former UK Prime Minister David Cameron. In conclusion, and my conclusion might be a bit long, in 2017, he also became a member of the Global Leadership Foundation, the UK, an organization which works to support democratic leadership, prevent and resolve conflict through mediation, and promote good governance in the form of democratic institutions, open markets, human rights, and the rule of law. This foundation does so by making available discreetly and in confidence the experience of former leaders to today's national leaders. It is a non-for-profit organization composed of former heads of government, senior governmental and international organization officials who work closely with the heads of government on governance-related issues of concern to those countries which they lead. Ladies and gentlemen, we are privileged to have a minister, Dr. Karuka, to share his appreciation of the theme, 3 decades of economic reforms in Uganda, building base for wealth creation and jobs. The Marquette University Sector Forum and the Bank of Uganda are confident that Dr. Karuka's speech will energize this audience here and the country at large and guide our strategy to enhance vibrancy being undertaken by Very close here. Please help. Yes, we will need to sort this before our keynote speakers are. So I am going to try and give this a couple of seconds. So it gives us confidence, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Makerere University Private Sector Forum and the Bank of Uganda, the two are very confident that our keynote speaker's speech will energize this audience here and the country at large and guide our strategy to enhance vibrancy being undertaken by the private sector and academia to complement government efforts of building a base for wealth creation and jobs. Ladies and gentlemen, please receive our keynote speaker, Dr. Donald Kaberuka.
Good morning. I promise not to be long. As long as you don't begin to look at your watches, I'll do 10 minutes at most. Now, I have no intention to talk about the Ugandan economy because the Prime Minister is here, he has spoken eloquently. I have no intention either of speaking about my friend Mutebile, because I know him to be a very modest person and he would be embarrassed by what I would say. I want to say something different. But before I do so, let me thank you, Your Excellency, Wakana Rugunda, for being with us today. Thank the Governor with your spouse. I can see here many familiar faces and friends. It's always a pleasure to see you. Now, as for the moderator, I'm not sure I was reading my CV, but thank you nonetheless for what you read, because my bow looks quite different. Now, as I was coming here, I had three reflections. One which Kaseken will have heard me say many times. In 1962, there's a famous professor, Hans Singer, who was in helping to set up the Economic Commission for Africa. It was asked, so which are the two countries, two or three among the newly independent African countries, was likely to get to middle-income country status in a reasonable period of time? He said, and I quote, the Gold Coast, now Ghana, and Uganda. The rest, as they say, is history. But I'll come to that in a moment. Something else I was also looking at as I was coming here, thinking about my friend from Sime, was that, as Rakana was saying, he was working amidst many socialists, including some residual socialists. I don't know whether Rakana was among them, but I'll not be very surprised. And then at the time I reflected that this was after the collapse of the wall of Berlin. A number of East European countries were beginning reforms as well. Poland, Russia, many others. It was very, very difficult. In fact, in the case of Russia, I think it took them probably another 10 years. Poland, a bit longer. So I was always impressed by what my friend here and his team were able to do amidst the sea of socialists around him, but also with his experience being still novel, even the mature economies. But I'll come to that. But let me begin asking a question and answering to myself. The significance of this morning has been well framed by Ruhakana and the Governor Mutebile. But that people might legitimately ask the question, do we need another center? Do we need another dialogue center? Don't we have them already? Don't we dialogue enough? That would be a legitimate question. And I think the best way to answer it as we begin to build the center is provide an adequate answer to it. For me, I would like to answer it in the following way. Today, African countries face challenges that no longer fully respond to old solutions. We have a whole range of centrifugal forces that have led to a vortex of complex problems that require fresh thinking. Again, as the Prime Minister was saying, fresh thinking by everyone, business, governments, academia, across Africa. What are some of those complex issues which no longer respond to old problems? The complex demographic dynamics, massive, unplanned, underserved urbanization, the impact of climate change, unpredictable geopolitics, and disruptive forces in science and technology. The continent has to explore alternative strategies and scenarios, building on what I've learned in the past, in the last 4 decades, which I'll come to later. So I joined the Prime Minister to say, I believe the convening power of this center would help take us to the next level, thinking about those problems, but also closing the gap between policy and practice. I was looking around, by the way, what is the Center of Excellency? So I went to a number of dictionaries. What is it? The only definition I could come across comes from the domain of healthcare and medicine. So Prime Minister, you might help me here. And it says, a Center of Excellence is a program within an institution assembled to supply exceptional high concentration of expertise, related resources in a comprehensive interdisciplinary fashion. So it's not simply another center. It's a center which must respond to what I've just described. This would make it a center of excellence. So I do believe the kind of dialogue we're having today, and which hopefully the center will galvanize within that great university, will go in that direction. Let me also add quickly that the challenge Africa faces are not unique to Africa, but they are brought into sharper focus because of the forces I've just referred to. When I was born, somebody said he doesn't want to say when I was born. I was born in October 1951. Is that right? So when I was born, I'm told that the population of Uganda was just under 5 million people. 5 million people. And I think I'm still young. Now, Uganda is 42 million people. In my own country, at the time, the population was just under 2 million. Now we are 12 million people. This is the story of every country in Africa. It requires massive investments in education, in healthcare, and above all, in jobs. And so, as I was putting my thoughts on paper, not simply remembering what Hans Singer said about Uganda and the Ivory Coast and the Gold Coast, I also recall something else, which is taught in schools of public policy, which some of you may be familiar with. Students of public policy are always taught the following: that a good policy has 3 essential elements. Miss one, it does not qualify. So the first thing is that it must be technically sound. That is not very difficult. You can look for experts, hire consultants, pay for them. You can get a set of technically sound policies. Number 2, it is not enough for the policies to be technically sound. Because I'm sure Uganda in the early 60s probably had technically sound policies. Something else must come in. Those policies must be politically feasible. And political feasibility has a whole range of things. The coalitions to accept them, the political environment, the costs, the timing, a whole range of things. So if you look at what could have given in between technically sound policies and political feasibility are looking here. But that is not enough. Policies must be technically very sound, politically feasible, but they also must be administratively deliverable. They must be executable. I'd be coming later to this question, trying to ask the question. Every single African country I know, thanks to our former chief economist, Kasegen, or at least most of them, has a plan to be a middle-income country at some point between now and 2030. So, the plans are there, they're good. They can be improved upon, but they're there. But what is it that stands between us, between intent and implementation? I want to come to that at some point. But it's something which was exercised when I was coming here. The third one is something I read a long time ago, and I've lost touch of where I read it. I'm still researching that. It is that a country is a bit like someone walking through a landscape near the sea. And near that sea, you have got a whole range of mountains. Tough mountains to climb, but you know they're there, you can climb them. You know you'll have to climb them. You could also have an active volcano nearby. And you could also have an iceberg in the sea nearby. Why do I say this? A nation goes through a journey in the landscape where there are problems whose characteristics you know very well. They could be difficult, they may take time, but you know them very well. You can see them, you can feel them. This is the image of mountains. But there are other problems where your information is partial and imperfect, your iceberg. What you see is dangerous, you can navigate around it. But what you don't see might actually be the most dangerous. And then you have got a volcano. You know it is there. You know it is active. You know it will erupt one day. What you don't know is when and how bad. A nation goes roughly through that kind of landscape. Now the skill of leadership and managers is precisely how to navigate through those kind of landscapes. You want an example of an active volcano in many African countries? Maybe we can discuss this, but you can think of a few which you have to plan for. Do you want an example of icebergs for which you have to manage imperfect information? I think we can come to that in my conversation. Let me now try to ask, so when the center is set up, what would be the main focus of thoughts? What would be the main issue to explore? Because it's not a research center, it's a university research center. It's a convening center, as Prime Minister Wakana was saying. But what's the challenge of many of our countries? I would put them into three categories. There are many more subcategories, but I will say three. The first one would be what I want to call growth with transformation. There's a lot of discussion about economic growth, but I believe this center will have to go a bit further. Growth with transformation. But growth is not an end. Growth is a means to transformation. But that is not enough. It has to be growth which provides equality of opportunities for all. Notice, I'm not saying equality of outcomes, because that is something different. I'm talking about equality of opportunities. And thirdly, it will have to be managing external shocks and building long-term resilience, so that you don't make progress and then fall back. I mentioned Hans Singer at the beginning, but I myself, some time back, I won't tell you the date, I made a similar observation, and I think I was right. What were the strongest economies at the time when I was making that statement? The most promising economies at the time were, believe it or not, the Ivory Coast and Zimbabwe at the time. But subsequently, they had challenges. And the challenges was the absence of ability to handle shocks, which are either internal, external, and absence of resilience. Why am I saying this? Tumsimi, I believe that this center has to be different. It has to ask a different set of questions. And I believe that if we do that, the center will add enormous value. Now, I begin by saying I'm not here to talk very much about Uganda because I claim no, you know your country more than I. There's no way I can sit here to talk about your country, you know, more than I. It's one similar situation. As I did say, today if I look at your national plan, it's some time back when I was the bank, I looked at it, everything's there. What you want to do, peace and stability, infrastructure, agricultural transformation, quality education, investor-friendly policies, it is all there. So it is not my intention to go over this ground. But I want to go back to my original question, to seek to get an answer as to what can we do to translate intent into execution. I don't claim to have an answer. I have a number of hypotheses. And the second would be, what is it we need to be aware of in the changing external environment in the world of today? So let me try to delve into what could be the problem as the gap between intent and implementation, between policy and practice. Perhaps this is where the dialogue can begin between the stakeholders. There could be many reasons. There could be a mismatch between ambitions and capacities. The former Prime Minister of Malaysia, in his book, whose title I can share with you, was saying when the Malaysians were doing their planning in the early days, they would begin by asking the question, we want to do this. Do you have the capacity? Yes, you tick. We don't have the capacity. Can we get this capacity elsewhere? Yes, we tick. But if both are no, we take it off the plan. That's what he says. You can see that I don't say I agree with him. That's what he says. It could be also that sometimes the plan might be front-loaded and overloaded. In other words, everything has become a priority. In that case, the little capacity that there is scattered. You recall in the early days of Chinese reform, one thing they decided to do was they will concentrate on particular areas, including, by the way, only on the coast of China. They agreed that strategically they will come to the hinterland later. That was their choice. But they concluded that an overloaded, front-loaded plan could cause them some difficulties. Sometimes there could be something else, which are found in a number of African countries. Not here, thank God. And I want to say it with all the candor at my command, a lack of a sense of agency. A sense that time is on our side. Now, if you combine all these issues together and many others which I have not referred to, that could easily give you the gap between intent and outcomes. Let me, though, before I become so full of myself thinking up the answers, point out 4 areas, and then I won't be long, I promise you, where I think also the center could be extremely useful. And here's the first one. Smart countries have known for a long time that winning economies require a private sector and a state sector that are joined at the hip. It is not simply a question of routine, ritualistic collaboration meetings. It is a living and dynamic collaboration. It is at the macro level, it is at the micro level. If you want an evidence of this, I don't know that Governor Tumsimi and I will see eye to eye on this. During the Asian financial crisis in 1997, when the Asian model was facing an existential problem, those countries there did things very different. Very different. But in two of them, at least which I'm familiar with, the government decided that while it accepts that some bankruptcies are necessary, it decided that it will do everything to limit the number of bankruptcies. And that involved the state taking the lead. Now, I know some of the people there, it was not because they were opposed to the orthodoxy, but it was an understanding that they had to walk through this crisis. Now, for those of you interested in this, we can discuss later, but this is what they did. And in so doing, they prevented damage and job losses. Now, I want to digress a bit, and for those who might be interested, there's plenty of literature on how smart states who want to work with the smart private sector can do it while not forgetting that they don't have the same mission. Now, for those who might be interested, I want to recommend, Prime Minister, maybe you want to send a delegation to Malaysia one time. There is an outfit they set up. They are called Malaysia Deputy Ventures. It's an amazing outfit. They provide a whole range of support to companies in particular sectors that can take advantage of opportunities in the global value chain. A whole range of financial products, quick turnaround decisions, even innovation on the collateral, access technology, but even getting involved in helping companies as they do loan applications to make sure that they actually comply with what the outfit needs. I looked at it when I was in the bank. It is amazing. The question I asked, but how do you choose the companies? Do you choose winners? How transparent? Are they a favorite? And they were honest to say, yes, there have been those issues, but along the way they had resolved them in a manner that transparency had become extremely convincing in my judgment. Here's another example for you of how smart governments and smart private sector can work together. Again, another country. So they found a big market for fruits and vegetables in one foreign country. And demand was huge. However, after about a year, they began to fail the quality test. The product, the quality was not consistent. And so they're being told to ship back your containers. And they were in danger of losing the market. So what do? They're not going to blame mode. It is them, it is me. They said together, what could be wrong? You know what it was? It was that there was a dispute in some of the factories between the managers and the laborers were deliberately contaminating the product. Because they were unhappy. But it took governments, it took managers, it took labor to work together to recapture confidence, to recapture that market, and it worked. But it took everybody sitting in the room working together to resolve this particular problem. Let me refer to another issue which I think the center might be extremely helpful. Now, I don't think a second will like not as deputy governor, but the former chief economist of the World Bank. I've often had a very naive view, very naive, that somehow Africa is said to be the shop floor of the world because of the wage differential with China. So real wage is increasing in China as the economy shifts to domestic consumption, and therefore that somehow Chinese manufacturing will shift to India or to Africa. That is the theory. Now, I do agree that as we improve our infrastructure, improve the logistics, get better clusters, macro policies are more predictable, Africa will get a share of those jobs. However, this is not preordained. There are many disruptions which you are familiar with, which will change the game, including, but not limited to, artificial intelligence. Now, why do I say this? And I want to address you, Mutebile, directly. But this raises a question fundamentally about our education model, the one we inherited from colonial powers. The issue of education in the light of the new fourth industrial revolution is an issue everywhere. That's a bigger issue for us in Africa. Because of the large numbers of young people coming to the labor market, because of the window which closes quickly, and technology is moving on. Where can we sit in academia, in governments, business, and talk about this? What kind of education do we need for 20, 25, 2030? For me, a center like this would be the ideal place. Let me add one more for you. In fact, I'll add 3. But the list will end there. The next one might be sensitive, but I'm among friends, I suppose. It's about natural resource rent. Then I come to new technologies. Then I come to the impediments which prevent our companies getting to scale and to global. So let me begin with natural resources. Of course, if a country is lucky to have a rich subsoil and that the resources are well governed and utilized, it provides a huge boost to investment in physical and human capital. There are many examples. But it is not a panacea. Evidence abounds that it clearly shows a weak link between economic transformation and the existence of natural resource rent. Evidence exists. That said, when well managed, it can provide a boost. I'm only saying there is a weak link between natural resource rent and economic transformation. In fact, if you look at Africa itself over the last 15 years, countries performing strongly have had no rent. But those with rent, their economic track record shows limited job creation, excessive volatility, and often poor choice of public investment. But this is a matter which is country-specific, and again, a center like this could be extremely helpful in showing the way in how it can be done. But let me come to the next one, maybe, which I do think requires us to spend a bit more time. And that is the issue to do with new technologies. Africa led on mobile telephony and associated services. Now, those in the know, there might be some in this room, tell me we may be on the cusp of something similar disruptions in energy provision, transport, biotechnology, and nanotechnology. Talent, education. That is where time of academia, of business, and senior leadership should be focusing. That's where the world is going. Now let me make my penultimate point on impediments to companies going to scale and to cross borders. I know the list impeding that is very long. You know more than I. But I want to say here that on the positive side, a number of African companies have been breaking through the borders despite huge challenges on movement of people and goods. However, the story they tell us is mixed. Some are doing extremely well, but others have faced many hurdles. And this is one of the key issues for the reform of the African Union, which I believe business have a vested interest to support. And I'm happy that I saw the former Commissioner for Agriculture here in this room. President Kagame of Rwanda is leading an effort to try and figure out how we can have an African Union fit for the challenges of today, whether it is financing, whether it is priority setting, whether it is how we project voice in the world, whether it is how the union becomes relevant for the citizens. All these things are on the table, and they'll be discussed again this month in Addis. But I hope and expect that African business will be the main champions of this, because at the end of the day, you are the principal beneficiaries. Now, I want to end my remarks by trying to position all this in the kind of world we live in now. And I want to say that when the 21st century opened, the year 2000, there was much promise. African growth for the first time had outpaced population increase. So real per capita incomes were increasing. And then you had the global meltdown. But because of the work done by the local Mutebile in previous years, and his team, Kasege and others, our economy is able to resist because the buffers were very strong and the economies are very resilient. I'll come to that again in a moment. Then in 2015, there was a big ray of hope. Sustainable Development Goals, climate deal, financing for development, and the rest of it. Then in 2016 came the earthquake, the populists, the nationalists, America first, failure to share benefits of globalization and manage the downside, multilateralism failing to provide answers, whether it is climate, security, human trafficking, trade, etc. Which means that Africa has to think afresh, because the world has changed. But in those changes, there are some things which we can take advantage of. And I can think of two. The first one is a famous multipolarity. This is jargon. I don't like jargon. This means there was a time when wealth was in the north, poverty was in the south. Knowledge was in the north, knowledge was exported to the south. All right? Now, the world is different. Capital is neither in the north nor in the south. It is in the private markets everywhere. But second, thanks to the crisis of 2008, we're no longer sure what are the correct policies. Now, since we are sitting with many bank governors here, anyone who studied economics in this room, if you would have mentioned something called unconventional monetary policies, then they would have think you should have your head examined. But now the leading economies of the world are practicing something called unconventional monetary policies, which, by the way, is a jargon for try to bring interest rates so low, even negative, to try to stimulate the economy, because the fiscal side is not working. It was heresy in those days. It's no longer heresy today. Which is the country today defending global free trade? Which is the country defending multilateralism? It is China. So, we're in the world where the multicultural forces have forced different parts of the world to sit in a room to say, we have the problems together, we share them, let us look for a solution. You no longer have a monopoly of knowledge, and by the way, not even the monopoly of capital. Let alone the fact that in the world we are moving in, it will not be capital which makes a difference, it will be talent which makes the difference. So finally, let me really conclude. And then I come to Mutebile. I said I won't speak about you, but now I will. You see, contrary to received wisdom, you can look at evidence. Actually, Africa between the 1960s and mid-70s were not doing so badly. The numbers are there to see. There was the Nigerian Civil War. There was troubles in the Congo. But quickly by 73, 74, they had recovered. What really set us back were three things. The first oil crisis in 1974. The second oil crisis at the time of the Iranian Revolution, 1979. And then the global debt crisis. Those three are the ones which set us down for many years. And you'll recall, 1980s, called the lost decade. By 1990, someone coined the phrase, they called it Afro-pessimism. Breakdown public finances, deindustrialization, huge external imbalances, states failing to provide services. By the way, Africa has faced three failed states: Somalia, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. Luckily, quickly, Liberia, Sierra Leone recovered somehow. But Somalia, we still have failed states, which began in 1990. So if you want to understand the weight of the reforms that are taking place in places like your own country, was that it was almost what, I don't know, those of you who read the Greek mythology, remember this chap called Sisyphus? Sisyphus was, someone who left literature, can remind me please? He was punished to push a stone from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill and leave it there. By each time he reached the top of the hill, the stone would come back to him. So he would start again. So Sisyphus was an image for a futile effort. So many people thought that economic reforms in those years were futile. It required hard work, it required consistency, it required discipline. Now I'm using the word discipline because I want to say something about it. We still need discipline. There is a saying in English that good times lead to bad policies. We are a very young country, we are a very young continent. Many people are not there, were not even born in those days. People easily forget. So it is very important. The work done by the like Mutebile and his teams, that discipline is anchored and is maintained. I'm not saying the discipline has disappeared. I'm only sounding a note of caution that it could easily be frittered. And if it's frittered, it will go back to the ways of Sisyphus. So I want to conclude by saying that what I think we need a center like this to do is to help us in Africa build what I call a new national project, a new continental project. I don't mean physical things. A project where all of us can come together. You might be from one part of the country, one ethnic group, one religion, but something which brings us together. And by the nature of those things are intergenerational. I went by, many of you like to quote the history of China. China was a power when many of the European countries were just peasant societies. Then China lost it. It became invaded by warlords. It was occupied by another country. So there was a generation which came in to deal with occupation. That one handed over to another generation, which began the process of rebuilding the pride and image of the country. Made some mistakes along the way, but happened. Handed over to another generation, which began shifting the economic mode of the country. Slow by slow, Learning by doing, but eventually they got it. Now this generation, which as you can see is now the one defending free global trade, multilateralism. Now in the words of one leading global thinker, we're in a world where there are two things, maybe one superpower about to retire, but not exactly wanting to retire, and another one very reluctant to assume that role, but they know the implication of that role. But I'm saying this because every generation hands over to the next something, that national project. And so something like this, to see me while commending everything you have done, your life has been full. It has been, as Prime Minister was saying, the life of a patriot, a builder. But now that next project, which you hand over to the new generation, must be the one which, first of all, consolidates the achievements, I mean the consolidation, and then takes it to the next level. So I promised to speak for 10 minutes. I don't know how long I've been here. 10 minutes. Oh, is that right? He says 10 minutes. Fine. I hope this has been useful. I'm happy to answer any questions, but thank you very much for listening. So, sometime in 2016, I was in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And then I received a visit by the distinguished elder in this room, Honorable Chikere. He had two missions actually. The second mission, I won't mention it, only he can do it. But it is related to his literary skills. I came to tell me about this project and to seek my support and counsel. And I want to say that immediately, without any hesitation, I asked him to count me on board. Because, not because Mutebile is my friend, but because I saw value, I saw promise, I saw a future in this. And I do believe that as part of honoring our friend Mutebile, I think all of us have a duty and obligation to put in our time, whatever we have to ensure that the center is a total success. So thank you very much again for listening.
We surely can do much better. Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Speaking to our keynote speaker a short while ago, he did promise that this presentation would be provided to the Makerere University Private Sector Forum and the Bank of Uganda, and that should then be passed on to you, our guests. If you request for it, you will be provided with this presentation. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, my time is up for this first session, but I honestly think there is a couple of people who may have quick questions for our keynote speaker. However, please be mindful, do not tire him, because he will return as part of a panel, and he may have a couple of more insights to share. But I'm open to some quick. If I can get 3 very quickly, hands up, I will bring a microphone to you, and we will do this very quickly. Then I'll ask him to return and just give us his reaction to your question or comment. Any quick questions? Yes. Microphone. Journalists, please stay away from this part of the session. Yours is there, and the bank has prepared a special session for that. All right. So my microphones are at the back. I just needed to have a mobile microphone. I see one hand there. Any other? Okay, so you've served my time, so let's have that. Your names? Yes, Robert. Yes, there. He's right there. I don't know where my microphone is. I am trying to track. Robert, we can actually hear you, but the problem is it's on live TV, so I can't allow you to speak without a microphone. We are bringing one. No worries. Okay. So Robert Kabshenga from the New Vision. Yes, Robert.
You said something about journalists speaking at the end, so I know you always treat us like that, so that's fine. So I will not speak as a journalist, I will speak as a farmer. And I have a question. You, Dr. Kaberuka, you raised a very interesting concept, which you said unconventional policies or something like that. Would you advise Governor Mutebile and the rest of the Bank of Uganda to employ some unconventional policies? For instance, require that farmers should only pay their loans in seasons, and that this whole monthly repayments and failure to pay in 3 months your loan is bad sort of approach, so that our repayments as farmers are seasonal, based on when we sell our crops and our cows and things like that, to reflect the nature of our, so that the financing can reflect the nature of our economic activity, and that's when our payments are done. And also, since other people are employing unconventional policies, can our interest rates as farmers be below those of Bank of Uganda, so that, I mean, and then you can really stimulate our ability to create wealth, and then also hopefully some people will get jobs. Thank you. I've spoken as a farmer. I'll come back later to speak as a journalist.
Thank you very much. Another microphone here, please. And then finally, Richard. So I only have those three, and then we'll ask Doctor to respond. Thelma, there, yes.
Thank you very much, Donald. We wouldn't have expected any less from you. Let me say that I was very impressed about your concept of putting intentions into practice. And you mentioned the lack of urgency that we seem to have in our societies. I was surprised you didn't mention the lack of commitment, the lack of integrity that goes into putting intentions into practice, something which seems to be a fundamental problem in our countries. And I think the country where you reside has tried to tackle that problem. I don't know if there are any others that have. But when I was in Rwanda, I came across this concept of akachiru. And I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But when I spoke to some young people, they said, oh, I said, why don't you mean you have to really go and pay your taxes? You mean you really have to go and do this? I said, oh yes, because we have akachiru. It was a kind, for them, it was a kind of national commitment. It was a personal dignity to being a citizen that knows how to translate intentions into practice and to do it well. So can you say something about that, please?
Dr. Thelma Awori is an extraordinary librarian, Ugandan, and has dedicated her life to activism, women's activism and empowerment of the continent. Thanks, Doctor. Richard, MD, NSSF, yes.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Richard Biarugaba, the NSSF. Thank you so much, first of all, for your good conversation. The question I've got, which you didn't touch on, is they taught us quite early that countries need to specialize. And you didn't seem to sort of talk about it in terms of how you can progress. So I just wanted to find out from yourself, in terms of could you have a comparative advantage as a country, and can you drive that to take you forward? Because obviously, you talked about labor going up in places like China, and therefore production coming to Africa, or the possibility of that in terms of theory. But the whole issue around specialization as countries, how would that then support developing the nation?
Feel free to You can come? Yes.
My friend Mr. Kapushenga, are you there? Well, I'm not a Ugandan taxpayer, so I'm completely unqualified to talk about Ugandan public policy. The Prime Minister is here and the Governor, so it's not up to me to prescribe what the government should do. And if I had advice for Mutebile, I will not tell you, I will tell him. That is not to say I don't have views, but I'm saying that good citizenry demands that I leave those matters to those who have the dockets. Now, tell me, on the sense of agency, let me just go back to the African Union, because you are distinguished in Africa. One of the issues we're struggling with now for the African Union is that at the time when individual countries have reduced their dependence on donors, our continental organization has continued to become dependent on donors. And absolutely don't believe that we cannot afford to fund our own organization. But we consider it right that foreign taxpayers continue to fund our organization, and we find that okay. And the effort that is demanded of each of us, frankly, is so small compared to the advantage that comes with that sense of urgency. And I want to link that to the issue of dignity which you raised. Because when in my country they say agachiro, which the word is here in Uganda as well, it's about your dignity as a nation, as a family, as a continent. Now, once that national project is built, the sense of urgency will follow. But there has to be a sense that we have European taxpayers, North American taxpayers, paying for our continental organization just cannot be right. And you know what? Some countries are being asked to pay 2 million, 3 million, 1 million. And because of that lack of sense of agency, the discussions take years, take time. And I do hope that both at continental level and at country level, the more we imbibe that value, the value of us as a people, we can do quite a lot. Now, I just want to add by saying something. In many of these Asian countries, when you ask them what are the 3 most important elements for development, they will not tell you about economic model. They tell you about 3 things. Number 1, stability. Number 2, dignity. Number 3, learning by doing. I repeat, stability, dignity, and learning by doing. Once you have those 3 in one place, economic models of one form or another will fit into place. I hope that is helpful.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I'll quickly mention that we are now going to transition from this first official opening session to our next session. So we will have a very, very short health break, about 5 minutes, and return. But as we do that, and I've been asked that we will all be upstanding for the national anthem and allow the Prime Minister depart. Please be upstanding.
All right, I'll allow the Prime Minister to depart. I guess we are still trying to find the East African anthem. But protocol should have been the East African first. So we are all right. Okay. So we want to thank, ladies and gentlemen, surely a round of applause for our Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Dr. Ruhakana Rugunda. We want to thank him for officially opening this dialogue, and I now request, of course, we will make some way for the Prime Minister to depart, and thereafter we will return with the next session. Ladies and gentlemen, please do not go very far. We only have 5 minutes, and then we'll do this. Okay, our official photographer and cameraman, please prepare yourself. We have a very brief photo shoot here at the front. So the cameraman, I request Professor know how to join them.
I'm Marion Grace Fuchiri, 23 years old. I met Mempo while I was in high school, Sankisto Bugolobi, and that's when they were having social survival skills training. Everything changed in my life. That's when my self-esteem and confidence highly improved. When I became Miss Makere 2014, I used that platform to inspire girls in Madi sub-region through a beauty pageant for a cause, for girl child empowerment. And through this, my team has helped to fundraise money for patients of breast cancer, for patients of sickle cells. We have distributed reusable pads for different schools. And all this I owe to MEMPRO for all the values instilled in girls. And I pledge to help girls in the future in the very same way they helped me.
Coming soon on NTV.
On this very stage last season stood 20 contestants, real people with real stories, whose NSSF benefits changed their lives forever for the better.
This year, the stories are even more powerful. 16 new contestants with 16 new inspirational stories will grace this very same stage for a bigger and better Season 2 of the NSSF Friends with Benefits show.
And the best part of this show is you, the viewer, gets to vote for your top 3 contestants who will win a combined total of 55 million shillings.
From the 21st of January 2018 for the brand new show.
Hosted by yours truly,
Crystal
and Gaetano.
The NSSF Friends with Benefits show. Coming soon on NTV.
Abantu b'embale manafasirongo buladiri bubinda n'ebitundu ebiriranyewo Enlight Relations n'abasumba b'embale bakuleetedde olukungaana lw'enjiri gaggadda Mbale Miracle Gospel Crusade n'omubuulizi w'enjiri Dr. Dada Mmole. Ekibangirizi kya Mbale Secondary School okuva ng'ennaku z'omwezi lumu okutuuka nga 4 omwezi ogwa February 2018 essaawa 10 ez'akawungeezi buli lunaku wajjikuba Women's Conference nga omwezi ogwa February ne Fire Conference ennaku z'omwezi nga 23 zonna conference zijja kuvanga saa 2 ez'okumakya okutuuka saa 6 ez'emisana ebyokulya n'okusula Yesu yagabudde dda tosuwa abayimbi nga Pastor Wilson Bugembe Joseph Ngoma n'abayimbi abalala bangi okuva mu kibuga ky'e Mbale ne Kampala ng'otadde okuwangula ebirabo okuli TV pikipiki amagaali amasimu ne airtime muleeta abalwadde abalemba baamuzibwe Yesu wali okubasumulula tosuwa
Fenna tujja kusoma bw'tusoma bulungi tubeera bulungi mu nnaku ezo neeraliikirira mpulira bubisifu na mirembe buli kimu nkisomyeko naye kinnemye okutegeera always ompya yanyamba sikyeraliikirira always natural mujja nsinga emirundi 3 tewaliko yadde n'erimu njija kusoma bulungi bwe nsoma bulungi mba bulungi ne always kusoma bulungi obulamu butandika leero sanyuka always.
Mutebile, I'm helping Ugandans make the smart choice. Why choose this powder?
It cleans just like any other ordinary detergent.
Ariel gives you better stain removal in one wash, even with less powder.
It can't be.
Observe grass, tea, and chocolate drink.
I'll need 1,
2 handfuls. And just 1 handful of Ariel. See? Better stain remover with only 1 wash. It's the smart choice for sure. Ariel removes tough stains in 1 wash.
Coming soon on NTV.
My name is Leia Olivar.
Why do you want to go to US?
Yun ang pangarap ko, anak. Na manirahan tayong lahat dun.
I'm going there for my mother. She died there. Abram! USA! Here I come!
A girl with an American dream.
Leia, umaasa pa rin akong mangyayaring araw na ito. Sama-sama tayo.
Di ba na kayong pamilya?
Niloko niyo kami. Anak, hindi, anak. Niloko niyo kami. Leia, anak, hindi.
Kailangan ko lang gawin to, Clark. Kasi lahat dito hindi totoo.
Stay. Leia.
Pinupunta na namin yung misis niya, si Leia.
Clark?
Leia!
Kinasal ang anak ko nang wala akong kaalam-alam.
Enjoy your stay, Clark, in hell.
Mga piliglalaki lang nakakainom dito. Bottoms up, ha?
Taga saan ang pamilya mo? Anong trabaho mo sa San Francisco?
Masha dancer. Joke lang po. Asawa mode on.
For better or for worse. For richer or for poor. But will it be just for now? Or until forever?
Leia, I'm here for you. You can't blame me for wanting to see you. Sa'yo pa rin ako.
Is required when their hearts take flight. Coming soon on NTV. Do you have what it takes to mess with her?
No, I said, how is your sickness?
Is my sickness improving?
So you've come to see whether the malaria has improved to what? To cancer, improved to diabetes. Do you want to know whether I am feeling better, or you want to know whether I'm about to die, whether the sickness is winning?
You don't want to mess with her.
Madam, no, it's okay. I was just saying, how are you? You say you are fine, that is it. I do not say how are you for you to tell me your life story. What's this? It's a greeting. I'm trying to be polite.
She will tickle your funny bone.
Jared, you've woken me up to switch off the light. Are you stupid?
I don't want to sleep. You switch off the light to sleep.
Can't you go and switch? What will happen if you actually leave the light on? I want to sleep when the light is on. What do you want to do when I'm sleeping exactly? What is it?
It's at night.
You want to sneak out the moment I switch off the light, or what?
They have given us homework.
You are home. Why don't you just enter inside and do it? If they gave you homework, did they give you answers?
No.
So where do they expect you to get answers?
Join Anne Kasime in the hilarious rib-cracking drama.
Madam, what's that? What are you doing? I thought you're here to cut his hair.
Yes,
what is that?
But this is part of the package.
The shoulder is part of the head. I'm stupid. I do not see that the shoulder is there hair around this area here.
Don't mess with Kasime.
Okay, excuse me, wait, girls. Maybe I don't understand what you want. Madam, what did you come here to do?
I don't understand.
You don't give to speak the truth. I swear, speak the truth and the shame with the devil.
Every Friday at 10 p.m.
No, are you mad? I told you I don't want to bathe.
You have to bathe.
I'm not.
Let me ask you, you think you are a snake, eh? That you shed skin and then you are clean. That is it. What kind of man are you? How old you are?
Don't mess with Kasime. Only on NTV.
Sights and sounds. Sights and sounds.
Yeah, so we are here in Naguru, on the Guru Hill to be precise, at the Professor Mutebile inaugural Professor Emmanuel Mutebile Center of Excellence Business Dialogue, of course Makerere University and the Private Sector Forum. It is the first, and we have in the house Dr. Donald Kaberuka, the former African Development Bank Chief back from 2015, Emmanuel Mutebile himself, the Central Bank Governor, many dignitaries, economists. We have the Chief of the NSSF, we have very many people in the house that cannot really list them all, but it's been really hot in here. Speaking the economy, you know, decades of economic reforms, etc. That's where the theme is anchored. But together with me here, I have one of the attendants actually who will introduce himself to you. I don't like to introduce people. You can introduce yourself, sir.
Well, my name is Peter Ngatejize. I head the Private Sector Development Unit at the Ministry of Finance.
Keep it right there, Mr. Ngatejize. Thank you very much. You are the right person. You had Dr. Donald Kaberuka, the former African Development Bank President, talking policies. Policies, how this government has nice policies. But policies must be politically feasible and deliverable also, administratively deliverable. What did you pick as a person who has been around? You have seen policies being made. You have, you know, they spoke about countries which have made policies work and seem to say, what are we not doing right? Why are we not doing it right? What did you pick from this lecture?
Well, first of all, to correct you, part of this Center of Excellence is about Professor Mutebile. His resilience and his ability, his transformational ability, especially in managing a process where we had a new government with new ideas.
But if you remember Dr. Kaberuka's speech, he actually anchored his speech on policies, and then later on he talked about Mr. Mutebile himself. But let's focus on the private sector that you could actually authoritatively speak for. What did you pick in terms of organizing our economy to deliver growth that we need? And Dr. Kaberuka talked about it.
Well, yes, you have seen that part of growth is to make sure that you have the public, private sector and academia functioning in tandem. If you miss that, if you miss the principles that you have heard about of integrity, of discipline, resilience, and I think at the end Kaberuka talked about dignity, a country to be able to find solutions to its own challenges. We can no longer think about the Washington consensus or say this is how things are done. It's basically talking about looking within ourselves to be able to find public-private sector partnerships to do it. But the most important thing I don't want to miss is what this Mutebile Center is going to be about. To be about discussing issues of our time so that the generation that follows the Mutebiles is able to address the challenges of our time in a more innovative way, where you are getting artificial intelligence, changes in technology, where you have to organize the agricultural sectors a little bit more differently than the ones, the economy that...
Talking about changes in technology, the changing environment, or where our economy, or where we are operating with, politicians and then policymakers, do you think we are ready? Is the landscape ready? Our minds really set, to be able to engage the academia? You know that we don't put money in research. It's almost not there. We do not research. And if you talk about research, the changing environment, which is being led by technology and innovations, it is basically funding research. Are we ready, to take that path and change our mindset and put money in research so that we can make this economy take it where it's supposed to be?
Well, the quick response is that I think we are not quite ready. But the good thing is that having a center of this nature, then we can have regular dialogue around which those processes and the policies we need to transform our education system so that the youth we generate are not the youth where you grew up, son, go to school, get a job, and you get promoted, but to be able to understand your environment and say, oh, well, China things are changing, America things are changing. But Africa, we have to realize that nobody globally now has a monopoly about knowledge or capital, and Africa and Uganda in particular now can use its own.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ngatejize, and Happy New Year, man. So the lecture is holding here, the inaugural Professor Emmanuel Mutebile lecture, Center of Excellence, and and this is why I insisted on speaking about the economy, about growth, about the changes that are currently taking place. The keynote speaker, the right guy, the former president of the African Development Bank, has been there, and he has seen it all. He has seen all these African countries put policies in place, but have they been able to implement them? Let me speak to the chief of Alpha Capital, Mr. Stephen Kaboyo. You're very welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Great, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
The lecture so far, what have you been able to pick? We had the Dr. Donald Kaberuka, who's the keynote speaker, who has spoken first, and then the Prime Minister, of course, but centering on, concentrating on Dr. Donald Kaberuka's speech, rather keynote address, where he spoke of African countries having good policies, having very good sometimes political environments, but not being able to put these policies in implementation, and not being able to channel these countries into the right growth path, but also seem to say, what are we not doing right? So exactly, what did you pick?
One thing that I picked is really the economic rule book of the 1990s for Uganda has run its full mile. It's now to think new thinking, retweak policies, and adapt to the changing environment. The economic dynamics of the 1990s are long gone. We're looking at other set of challenges. Urbanization, the demographic challenge, all those things come with a bit of heavy load. So really the whole thing is rethink policy, rethink new strategies, retweak even the growth strategy for Uganda to adopt the new demands on the economy.
If you listened carefully when you were starting, you said we have dialogued enough. And this is a dialogue, and there's going to be so many dialogues coming up, talking. Do you think it is a time for us now to put our talk into action? Because, at a level that Dr. Kaberuka is, if he says we've talked really enough and we must start working, is he trying to refer to other African or even East African economies that are on the ground working and talking less?
I think the issue is we cannot continue lamenting. We know the challenges we face. We need to attack them head on. So the issue of talking, lamenting about our problems is not good enough. Evidence-based solutions are the things that are going to drive us to the next level. Those are the things that are going to drive scale. So really, it is good that all the policy people are here and they hear this. So going forward, it's about solutions and let us front load those solutions to be able to bring us back on track. When you look at the economic dynamics of Uganda, really all indicators have been pointing downwards.
Okay.
What brings us back? What are the drivers? And the drivers can only come.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We're running out of time. Building a base for wealth creation. And the lecture will be going on. We'll be bringing you more updates going forward. Coming up next, the lecture, Morris Mugisha moderating. Stay tuned.
Okay, and we have all our guests return to the Hashim, can we have our panelists return to the hall? We have, I think, Professor Kwesiga. Requesting that we have all our guests return, ladies and gentlemen, so we can start this second session. Take a bucket. It's okay. Just take. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I will be asking our protocol to return our keynote speaker. So whoever is with our keynote speaker. All right. Okay. Thanks, Patrick. Requesting that we can have water for the panelists, please. Whoever is handling that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you back to this, our second and last session of the dialogue. Welcome to the Tumsime Mutebile Center for Excellence Business Dialogue. We've now moved into the plenary, or say the panel discussion. Allow me to introduce my panelists, at least those that are already here, because we are trying to manage this time. You will notice this will be a little fast-paced and short and precise. Let me begin with the Honorable Maria Chiwanuka. She's a Senior Presidential Advisor on Financial Matters As you're aware, she's responsible for the Bretton Woods institutions. She's former Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. And from the 80s, I must mention, she's worked with the World Bank as an economist and financial analyst for the East African, Asia and Southern African regions, but also managing director of Radio 1 and Radio 2 here in Uganda. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Maria Chonka. I want to introduce Mr. Patrick Mwehire. He's the CEO of Stanbic Bank, Uganda. And prior to joining Stanbic Bank, Mwehire worked for several reputable financial institutions in London and New York. He was managing director in charge of investment banking for 4 years with Renaissance Capital in London, but also joined Prudential Securities as an associate in the mergers and acquisition department as early as 1994. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Patrick Mwehire. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Also with us, Associate Professor Eria Hisali is the Principal College of Business and Management Sciences at Makerere University, where he has been since 2000. And he holds a PhD in economics from the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. And he's done a number of consultancies with the UNDP, the Parliament of the Republic of Uganda, the Tanzania Economic Development Trust, and the World Bank FAO, among others. Ladies and gentlemen, Associate Professor Eria Hisali. And allow me to introduce Professor Charles Kwesiga, who is Executive Director, Uganda Industrial Research Institute. He's an industrial engineer by profession with experience as a corporate manager, management consultant, an educationist, and an entrepreneur. He's the second vice president of Waitiro, or the World Association of Industrial and Technology Research Organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Professor Charles Kwesiga. I'm sure I don't have to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Donald. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll try and keep this very, very short, but we would like to pick the minds of these very highly placed people to share with us a couple of things around the conversation this morning, which was kicked off by Professor Mutebile himself and the Prime Minister, and later our keynote speaker. So I want to begin with the Honorable Maria Chonka, and I have a couple of minutes. Let's keep it tight. Quick reaction to the keynote speech, but I want you to stay around some of the areas he shared with us. Demography, and he shared the numbers. 5.1 when he was, in the 50s, when he was born. 42 million. And our macro policies, and whether we are actually addressing that huge concern in terms of the huge numbers that are going up. I have a microphone somewhere here. Yes.
Quick rewind. Thank you, Dr. Kawaruka, for that very innovative presentation. I think it brought out the fact that we can't rely on growth alone as an indicator of well-being for Uganda or any other African country, given our demographic bulge or boom or whatever. We have a fixed quantity of land, which is the most valuable resource. Our population has gone from 5 to 42 million. And I think just around Kampala alone, we have 5 million people now. So we need to look at value added. We need to see how to employ more people with the same amount of land. And given that we are all about agriculture, we need to look at value added. We need to look at processing to enable a transformation, which I've always described as having more jobs at more value added for more Ugandans across the country. And it's where I've often argued with the governor, where I say I think the central bank's policy should not be just monetary stability, but employment. Because without employment, you don't have effective demand. People might like things, but they can't afford them. And this is where the private sector comes in. To help make sure that their consumers have the effective demand, that their consumers can make the savings for people like Patrick to take care of. So that's where we come together, the private sector, government, and academia. How to make more jobs for more people, to have more effective demand for the private sector industrialists, to make sure the government gets more tax revenues for its social programs, and to generally take care of the sustainability and inclusiveness that will bring growth to mean development.
Thanks very much, Honorable. Let me ask Patrick. Patrick, let's pick it up from there. And you know, Dr. Donald shared something around transformation or growth and transformation. So you have this huge number of people that continuously increases. On Monday, we'll have another couple of thousands of graduates outside of Makerere with the graduation that's happening next week. How much are we doing to create a sustainable environment for these people to come into the job market, but also create employment, not necessarily creating job seekers, but job creators? And he touched on something that's very core. Do we still need this education model? Is it addressing our current needs at the moment?
Thank you, Morris. First of all, thanks again, Don, for sharing those remarks with us this morning. And I think if you look at the Ugandan case study and you go back between 1990 and 2014, for 2 decades, Uganda grew at roughly 7%. Since then, we've struggled to grow 1 percentage point above our population growth rate, which is one of the highest in Uganda, in Africa, at 3%. So clearly something has gone wrong. And something needs to be fixed. So Uganda is at a point where we kind of need to hit a reset button on a number of things, because we were growing and transforming for those 2 decades. And you know, the governor was very instrumental in some of the liberalization. We opened the economy. Everything was going right. But because of our huge population growth rate, there has to be something unique that's done in creating employment. We add 1.2 million babies a year, but we create less than 100,000 jobs a year. So, and this problem continues to get compounded because you've got all the legacy issues. My perspective on this is that we've got to start having more of a strategic way of thinking about the nation, and really having that public and private sector coordination that tackles these problems holistically, and going into sector by sector and figuring out where are the roadblocks, what is it that the public sector can do, the government can do, what can be addressed with policy, what needs capital, and start thinking a little bit more diligently on coming up with solutions. But right now, we sort of kind of have flavor of the month policies, and we haven't really thought through that we have a huge challenge. The biggest benefit that I see in terms of job creation is supporting SMEs. SMEs are going to be the future of job creation in this country, but they're faced with a number of challenges. 70% of SMEs in Uganda don't make it to their 3rd anniversary. And I think that's a problem. And most people assume that that is because they lack capital, it's high interest rates. There are a lot of symptoms that people throw as the reasons why these SMEs don't actually get to that point. But there are deep structural issues, governance issues, there are issues around understanding their market, issues about quality control, going to market, all these other issues. And unless we look at those collectively and give them a helping hand, and have maybe 90% of these SMEs survive to the 5th year, extend their shelf life, they're going to be the future. Job creation is not going to come from Stanbic Bank. We've got 2,000 employees. Even if we grew 20%, we can only create 400 jobs a year. But we can play a key role in supporting SMEs. We have 40,000 SME clients in our account in Stanbic Bank, and we're trying to reach out and see what it is we can provide in their ecosystem to have them survive a little bit longer and create more jobs. And then lastly, to your point about matching our education system to what is available. There's one example that I'll share, which is speaking to the oil and gas executives, they did a baseline survey where they were looking at what skill gaps existed in the Ugandan market. And they found that they will need about approximately 10,000 welders or fabricators for oil and gas. It might be for a short period of time, but they were only able to identify about 1,000. Yet we still have about 10,000 marketing degrees being churned out every year. So there also has to be a connection between what is in the marketplace and what we're churning out. We unfortunately killed all the technical and vocational schools and converted them into universities. I think that was a big mistake, but it's not too late to reverse some of those bad decisions.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Let me turn to Professor Kwesiga. And the reason I'm going to you is because Patrick says if we can revise our industry or sector by sector policies, and let's begin around the conversation on industrialization. There's been a conversation, and at several African Union summits, there is a conversation around whether industrialization will address our labor force gap, and whether that's the place we should be investing our monies to be able to create thousands of jobs, if not millions of jobs for the entire continent. However, my question is, where you sit, which is heavily research, what does it tell you? Will this transform our economies? Because by going by our theme, building the base for wealth creation and creating jobs, does this solve the African problem? You have a very youthful population, especially here in Uganda and across the entire continent. Will this be the silver bullet, if I may ask?
Sure. Of course, industrialization is the answer to a lot of the problems we're talking about. But before I get into that, let me be very thankful to the arrangers, the organizers, and thank Dr. Kaberuka. He's been my hero since about 1980. 1980, I was visiting, I was on vacation from United States, and I came to Kampala, and I was invited to Kigali by my friend Patrick Mazimpaka, who had been my classmate in Tele school. And I came to Kigali, and I had the opportunity to visit your house, to come to your house for a cup of tea with Honorable Stephen Mwanga, Patrick Mazimpaka, and I saw a star in the making because he was newly appointed as Minister of Finance at the aftermath of the genocide. I had known a lot about the genocide because of the current Minister of Foreign Affairs, Louise Mushikiwabo, who had been with in Washington. I was aware of the details from her. But when I met you and I saw the sense of optimism, that sowed the seed for me to start thinking of repatriation myself. So I thank you very much, and you've been a star all this time. And so when I come to a panel like this, I mean, what can you say about a presentation by the one and only Dr. Kaberuka? Last time I saw you, your modesty was just so disarming. I met you in an airport in Europe, in Amsterdam. You're on your way to Charles River, Boston, but you still had time as you are walking towards the gate. You still had time to write on scrap paper your contact for me to keep in touch. I thank you very much. Back to
I was about to ask you to do that because it will never end. Please go ahead, Professor.
So now, for industrialization to happen, it requires three major factors: appropriate technology, skilled manpower, and affordable financing. I don't have the competence. I'm not an authority on affordable financing, but I can hold my own on technology and skills. And so, if you have those three in place, there is no reason why you cannot industrialize, and there is no reason why you cannot deliver the jobs that we are looking for. There are a few pitfalls why why it's not happening, and I will address myself to the issue of skills. I can ask the Secretariat if you can put just one slide from what I gave you. And I'll tell you which one. Now, recently, from 2012.
First forward the slides, please. He'll tell you which one. Yes.
Yeah. I think slide number 8 or 9. Slide number 9. Recently, as recent as 2012, I started grappling with this issue of industrialization, especially the element of skills. Because we are busy exporting jobs, and we're getting horror stories about because of the kind of jobs we're exporting. Why don't we export skilled manpower? Why don't we create our own skilled people so that we can have a head start on industrialization? And I put the question, two issues. I looked at two models. America, where I lived for the longest, has a way of training people. You have degreed engineers who go for 4-year degrees. You have junior colleges who focus on technical skills. Those are the foundation upon which industry is built. But just like Patrick just mentioned, what are we doing with the vocational schools? We are giving certificates that are really worthless and not giving skill. If we looked at that model, then look at the model here in Kenya. Who is the manager of this hotel? Do you know the name? He'll probably be Kikuyu or Kamba, but most definitely, most likely, it will be Kenyan. Why have the Kenyans dominated the hotel industry? It's because of the way they are trained. If you go to Utalii College, you find a training institution. On the same campus, they have a 5-star hotel. The people who train in the hotel industry and in the hotel training facility also do apprenticeship in a 5-star hotel. By the time they leave that campus, you can't outcompete them in the job market. We can do the similar thing with our own manufacturing sector, with our own industrialization sector. And so I wanted to share that slide I had wanted, which is a model that we have created, that one there. As we speak, construction started on 30th November last month, last year. It is a model where we are going to impart skills training, and along with the skills there will be production facility to make products that actually are ready for the market. And our trainees will be doing apprenticeship in a real production floor. When I wrote this concept in 2012, it was embraced by the president in 2013. March 2014 is when the Chinese offered to give us a $30 million grant to build this facility and equip it. We are going to be doing a groundbreaking on the 25th of this month. And I would invite you to come and we discuss this, because this is going to change the face of industrialization in this country.
Thanks, Professor.
Thank you.
My time is, yes. Thank you very much, Professor. Again, these presentations will be shared by the Private Sector Forum. Let me ask the Associate Professor to share with us a conversation around another very key sector, the informal sector, and what's their role around this conversation. So as we discuss wealth creation, we have a huge informal sector. Where do we tap in?
Thank you, moderator, and thank you once again, Dr. Kaberuka. In the keynote address, mention was made of that good partnership between the state and the private sector, which I entirely agree with. But then what would be the starting point? Do we have that private sector now that we can rely on to diversify our exports and to do the sort of structural transformation that we might want to see? So I think then if we don't have it, then we need to build the private sector. What can we do to build the private sector? Now, fortunately, there is some window of opportunity. There is the large informal sector already within Uganda, the SMEs that the colleague spoke about here. The SMEs keep expanding year after year. I think currently we have close to 3 million enterprises. So basically, out of the 5 or 6 million households, almost 50% will have a small enterprise that they are operating. Now, what we need to clarify is that, contrary to the view that 70% or even more of them do not live to see their third birthday, what actually takes place is that their transition is taking place within the informal sector. And I think this is something that we will be building on in informing some of the programs of the center. Transitions are taking place within the informal sector. Just as an example, if one started off as a hawker and bit by bit you saved some little money, 2 years down the road, you could now have a stall by the roadside. Now the hawker as an enterprise is no longer there, so we could interpret it to mean that that enterprise no longer exists, but this same household, this person will have an enterprise, but they will have transitioned into something else. So what we are seeing is transitions within the informal sector. Their transition is within the informal sector, but not closure of business. The actual fact of the matter is that those that close are actually around 10 to 11%. So then the focus of our discussion then should be now that we have this opportunity already, we have people who are already very enterprising. So how do we tap into this? How do we support them? How do we use the center, the proposed center, to support transitions to take place not only within the informal sector, but now to begin having meaningful transitions outside of the informal sector. You start informal where possible and then grow on to develop something big. Fortunately, we have some examples of where this has happened. Even within this country, we can mention a number of enterprises, a number of people who started small, who started informal, and they have gone on to build very, very powerful business empires. So how do we tap into this to create many more examples that we can learn from, that can inspire others, and build this very, very important private sector? Of course, I do appreciate the important role that the private sector is going to play, but we need to make use of the proposed center to support the private sector. And one entry point from the point of view of the informal sector is to help support transitions that move these enterprises outside of the informal sector, as opposed to moving only within the sector.
Thanks, Professor. Professor, yeah, I want us now to pick the mind of our keynote speaker, Dr. Donald. We are at a stage where a conversation has begun by the Center of Excellence, the Mutebile Center of Excellence, that is bringing on board the private sector, government, as Maria was also sharing, and the academia. But I don't want us to lose focus of another group called politicians, and this is not government. Let's not, because those also can become a destabilizer in this conversation. But Donald, this is the question. We are at a point where the politics of the day is literally running, in some countries, is running the economy. And so there has been a conversation around what Rwanda has done versus what South Africa is doing. So here's the difference, is that you have, in the South African case, the private sector, call it private sector-led growth of the country, and versus Rwanda, where you actually are having what they call government-led growth. And correct me if you can. However, you have a position now where you have, in the case of South Africa, and I shared this with the Honorable Maria yesterday, somebody who's still in the private sector, but also is a politician by right, and is now the president of the African Union, the African National Congress, who will probably be the next president of South Africa. That conversation around the role of the private sector in driving national development without necessarily having to deal with these other bottlenecks along the way. Doctor.
Moderator, I don't like where you are. You're framing this conversation because, number one, I think that we should stick to where we are here today. There are many other forums where those things can be discussed. And I think our comparative advantage today is to focus on what the center will do to elevate the level of conversation of a transformational nature. Now, cross-country comparisons are not helpful. Every country is different, every country has its own starting point, context. So I think if you end that conversation, I suggest you have it in another forum. But you are the moderator, so I think if we try to stick to the heart of this conversation, the problems we are discussing today are not specific to Uganda. They are generic to literally all the countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and even some in the middle-income countries of Africa. It is where we resolve them which are specific to each country. I hope I'm getting right. But since you seem to like comparisons with countries, let me take you to another country you didn't mention, which often when people talk about Korea, Uganda, Ghana, they have to compare. So 1971, the per capita income of Korea was $370. $370. You can check the numbers. Okay? So what would be interesting for the center like this one is to figure out how within 10 years, I've forgotten the number, within 10 years, President Park had aimed to get Korea to middle-income country status by 1981. They actually got there 3 years earlier, 1978. So what is it that happened? It must be Korea-specific, but what are the lessons can we draw? And one of the lessons, there are many others, was precisely of how the states, not seeing the weakness of the private sector, but understanding the importance of the private sector, decided, if you want, to hold their hand, work with them, all right, supporting them through targeted policies, but with clear exit strategies. So I hope the center does not focus on how can we do better, a bit more what I've been doing already. It should be a conversation which is transformational. Not a conversation, how can we improve what to do with the informal sector or with particular area. What would we take this country, country like Ghana, country my own Rwanda, country like Zambia, and many others, actually make that leap forward into the mixed status, which is possible and is feasible. So I'm answering your question.
I'm answering my own question.
Wish to say that we have a chance here, once you have academics, business people, government, thinking together, same sense of agency. The problems are generic. It is the solutions which are country specific.
Thank you, Doctor. It's not every day you find Doctor to ask some of the questions, so you take your chances. All right. I want to ask the Honorable Maria, picking up from where Doctor has shared, let's localize this conversation and begin where he's suggesting solutions around what the center, Excellence Center, should be addressing. You've been in the Ministry of Finance yourself, and we are looking at a conversation between academia and the government and the private sector in providing solutions, workable solutions, for us to actually grow our economy by creating jobs and, of course, putting some money in our pockets. Take us through what you think we should be quickly addressing. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As Dr. Kabaruka was speaking, I thought of something that we've been trying to do here in Uganda. This is just as an example, and the opinions there are my own. The government has 10 crops or 10 agricultural outputs that it is giving priority to, including cassava, maize, bananas, coffee, cotton, dairy farming. There are 10 areas. So I said, what if the center took these 10 agricultural commodities, because it's well known that Uganda has a comparative advantage in agriculture across the region, and say, okay, what do we need to boost production and value added in these commodities? Where has the government put in the infrastructure, which is a government mandate? Where do we have the roads? Where do we have the irrigation? Where do we have the power? In different regions of Uganda, and having provided the infrastructure, which was very much a rallying cry under Dr. Kabaruka's stewardship of the ADB, what else is needed? Take coffee, for instance. Take a corner of Uganda where there's the infrastructure, and say, what do you need? Oh, we need irrigation, or we need pest control, or we need agricultural extension services. This is where then the academia comes in. Every day in the newspaper, we read about how narrow or NADS has come up with a cassava mosaic-resistant strain of cassava. Then on page 8, you read cassava mosaic is sweeping across eastern Uganda. So let us bring the innovations of academia that are relevant to the macro objectives of Uganda, that is innovations to do with agriculture and agribusiness, put them where the government has provided the infrastructure, and then get the private sector to bring in the processing, the financial training, and the reality. And give ourselves some targets. Say, in 5 years, this area of Uganda should have produced this amount of cassava or this amount of coffee, and that is why anyone putting a factory in that area to process coffee or cassava, as the case may be, will get a tax rebate. You pay your taxes, but then when you start producing, you have a rebate. Academia, we should be encouraging skilling in the technical areas. If we have a technical school for carpentry, okay, maybe the government could think of giving graduation presents of a carpenter's toolkit to the student. Namamve, the innovation center that Professor Kwesiga is going to put up, should have input from the industrialists on that estate. I saw this in Morocco, where the industrialists have a say in the syllabus of the skilling center. What do you need? What do you need to offer people employment? And having offered that skilling, then the industries will undertake to take on the outcome of those technical institutions. I'll finish with an example, another example again from Morocco. Dairy in Morocco. everyone knows that Morocco is basically semi-arid to a great extent. But there was a dairy collective where the collecting center would give free extension services to the dairy farmers. And he would give them free vaccinations and artificial insemination of their cattle. And in return, when they gave him their increased milk output, he would deduct the costs of his inputs from what he paid them. And as a result, it had a thriving industry in yogurt, ice cream, powdered milk, everything that increases the shelf life of milk. So I think if we got more of this going under the center can bring the government, the private sector, academia, and the fourth P, when you think of PPP, there's a fourth P, the producer, the smallholder. That way you'd get them into the equation, and Uganda would become increasingly dominant in something that we have a competitive advantage in, which is agricultural output for the region, staple food for the region. All the countries around Uganda depend on Uganda to some extent for food imports. Why do we export raw maize? Why do we export bananas in their skins to Kenya or northern Tanzania, South Sudan? They should go processed. And the East Africa community would be happy with this because the only stipulation they say is free movement of food across borders. They don't say whether it's processed or unprocessed. So we said no more unprocessed maize to go across the border to Kenya, where it is sold back to us at a much greater cost, and where the residues stay there as poultry feed, and that's one reason we had a poultry feed crisis a few years ago. Thank you.
Thanks, Honorable. Patrick, quickly, because I want to open this up for a couple of questions, but the conversation around fresh rethinking, and so this is where the Center of Excellence comes in. She suggests let's go big in a place where we have a comparative advantage, but also we are saying we have a very young, youthful population, and we're wondering, is this where we're going amidst this thing called the digital revolution? Should the center be thinking in that space?
Yeah, I think Maria hit it on the nail on the head. One of the things that I would like to see the center do is to really help us, if you recall in the morning from Dawn's comments about overloading or front loading, is to really prioritize. One of the challenges that we have in government spend, even private sector spend, is that there's a lack of discipline on actually figuring out the return of that spend and being very disciplined about what is going to have the biggest impact. And we can't do everything. We can't do everything at the same time. So if we can have clarity on the top 3 things that will have the biggest impact on job creation in Uganda, and also then fact check where the government resources are being spent to really put that discipline around getting a return on that spend, I think that will set us in a very, very good direction. And then we can have another conversation 12, 24 months later about what do we do next, and then get to a very disciplined way of sequencing how we are moving into that middle income status. Right now, we've got lofty ambitions and intentions, and there is no way of working backwards on how we're going to meet that, and having really good hard milestones that actually we can all put ourselves to test and say, have we achieved that? Now do we move on to the next thing? And I think that that is a perfect role for a center like this that can bring in neutral parties, academia, private sector, public sector, and we have a real dialogue about our nation and really hold each other accountable. If we can do that, I think we will have huge success with that.
Thank you, Patrick. All right, I'm taking a few questions very quickly because I only have 10 minutes to wrap this up. So, yes, I'll begin here. I'm hoping you can come and move this microphone. Yes, there. Your name quickly and question.
Good morning or good afternoon. I'm Nitin Madhvani. It's a question for Dr. Kaberuka. In pursuit of transformation, you gave the example of Korea, and I think nearer to home we can look at our neighbor in Rwanda, where you're from. Is this a top-down affair? And if it is a top-down affair, then shouldn't this Center for Excellence commence at the top in order to convey the concepts of transformation and the mechanisms to bring that about?
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Matthew Ruchikeire, and mine is not a question. It is really a comment. Dr. Kaberuka mentioned that some time back I paid him a visit in Massachusetts at Harvard University to discuss a number of things. And I spent a lot of time with him one evening. One of the reasons, as he pointed out, was to try and persuade him to get involved in this effort. When I spoke to a few people just a little while ago, they thought that I had gone to persuade him to come and participate in this particular forum. That's not right. I had gone to invite him to become part and parcel of the private sector participation in the effort for transforming the economy of Uganda. And when I mentioned Tumusime, on the basis of Tumusime's record over the last several decades, in which I was involved with him, and knowing the need for this effort that we require to transform Uganda, he said, I will have no hesitation in coming on board to help you. Dr. Kaberuka is not an ordinary person. He's really one of the preeminent economists and intellectuals in the whole of Africa, if not in the whole of the world. When I met him in 2016, he was about to shift partly to make his base in Nairobi, partly in Nairobi, but largely in London, because Massachusetts in the States was no longer compatible with the demand which was being put on him. London was more central, was more reachable, and most of the people who wanted him to participate would find it more easy to find him in London. So I think we are extremely privileged to really have such a mind, because these minds are few, they are not many, and the needs for Africa, and particularly for Uganda, are enormous. So I am saying these few words to thank you, Don, and also to inform this congregation that he has agreed to remain part and parcel of this effort. So thank you very much.
All right, I had a hand here, yes. I need to mention amongst us and amidst us is the Vice Chancellor, Makerere University. Professor, your question.
Thank you, moderator. My question is to Dr. Kaberuka, but I don't mind if the other panelists can also give their views. Dr. Kaberuka, some time back I read, about 3 years ago, in The Economist, a story which I think circulated among very many people in Africa, which was saying Africa is the next growth region of the world. Now I'm beginning to read some articles that are skeptical about that. What do you think has gone wrong in that short time? And then, very many studies have claimed that the success of the Asian tigers is because of the heavy investment they put in higher education. Do you agree with that? If you do, what should Africa do? Because even Vision 2063 claims that the success of that vision will be due to heavy investment in higher education. I personally don't see that heavy investment taking place. What do you think about all these things?
Doctor, I'll allow you answer that before I take another set of questions. Yes. Or did you want to take them omnibus? I can. Any more?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Matthew, for those kind words, and others have spoken But I tell you what, I don't like to be a star. My nature is a belief that any success, any machine that works is a sum total of different things happening. And I'll give you an example of what I call when President Kennedy came to office in 62 or 3, old age catching up, he realized that Russia had overtaken the West in terms of rocket technology. Because the Russians had just put a man in space. Those of you who are older remember. And so, Kennedy then decided. Remember I mentioned something called a national project? He realized that there was a strategic gap evolved between them and the Soviets. And this had huge implications. And so this is what he said. You can go back and search records. We will get man on the moon. So aim number 1. Aim number 2, by 1970. So there is a date. And number 3, and bring him back to Earth. So it's finality. Now, having created that sense of agency, that sense of national project, then all Americans ride along, whether you are a scientist in Massachusetts, an engineer in Caltech, maybe even a farmer in Georgia, you rallied around that national project. And that national project does not need stars. It needs everybody to do what they're supposed to do, in line with what the project has put in place. In my judgment, this is what we need more of this in Africa. I think stars like me are actually a distraction. If you're looking for stars, there'll be distraction. We're looking for a national project. We're looking for a continental project, something which we can all rely upon to try to get this particular. This is number 1. Number 2, someone asked me this morning about comparative advantage. I'm sorry I didn't answer. But I've got a distinguished economist here, Kasege, and he can answer that. But this is how, in my old economics, now. So, and it's to Africa is happening now in some countries. Ethiopia. Because Ethiopian power is very, very cheap. It's about 4 cents, 5 cents per kilowatt hour. There are plenty of it and developing. So relative. So there is that advantage, cost advantage. It's fine. But you see, the Ethiopians have the next level to realize that that advantage could be eaten by poor logistics. So they completed an electric railway with Djibouti, which cuts down travel from 10 days to 10 hours. You get it? And improve the logistics, because manufacturers are looking for a cost advantage, but there are many other things they're looking for. They should deliver their goods on time. You don't want to produce goods, you can't deliver them on time. They're looking for policy consistency on the currency. They're looking for clusters around what they're offering. Because if you make maybe a bottle like this, you need more products. So, along these value chains global now, every country can find its own place. One will have a comparative advantage. Another will have a comparative advantage of very little corruption. Another comparative advantage of things that work. Another distance. So as you look at where on the global value chains you want to fit in, it's important to begin to think that the nature of trade has changed dramatically over the last 30 years. There's no longer a product to export from country A to country B. Long time ago, I used to think that the Airbus was made in France. It isn't. Bits of it are made everywhere around the world. and then they're assembled together in Toulouse. The services around logistics, financial services, are from different places. That is the way to think about comparative advantage. But not to say I can produce cheaper bananas than my neighbor who can produce cheaper coffee. That is old economics. But I speak in front of a distinguished economist here, I'm sure he can correct me. So if you have got cheaper electricity, it's fine. But you have to figure out other things. People will be looking at, does this state work? Will it take a big part of my margin? Are there some rent-seeking characteristics? All those things form part of your comparative advantage. Now, one more thing I wanted to say about these cycles of Africa rising, Africa not rising, and so on. Frankly, this is for journalists. I think let journalists write what they want to write. But there are facts which we cannot deny. Fact number one. In the 80s, our continent was getting poorer. As my friend was saying, we had a rapid increase in population and negative rates of growth. So we're getting poorer. It's a fact. In the 1990s, even worse. But at the time, this is when the lack of Mutebile had begun the reforms to try and stabilize the economies. And so at the turn of the millennium in 2000, again another fact, the large majority of a number of African countries had actually begun to see a turn of the corner where the real per capita growth was actually increasing. Now, there is a myth that it was linked to commodities. I don't agree. In commodity-rich countries, it was very volatile. But in places like Ethiopia, Mount Country, Rwanda, here in Kenya and others, this whole East African space, which is not natural resource rich, growth was steady, driven by investments, domestic consumption, good policies, many other things. Now, along the way, the global financial crisis has happened. Now, we had enough buffers to withstand the crisis, but we had been hit. That is a fact. Now, I don't buy the idea that somehow the dynamic which Africa generated in the year 2000 has been lost. Incidentally, even for oil exporting countries, today oil is how much? $60? $60. Not long ago it was $24. Not long ago the Nigerian budget was built on assumption of $40 a barrel. The excess had to go to the excess crude account, I think. So is the $60 for a barrel of oil such a dramatic price of oil? Is the price of $6,000 for a ton of copper so bad? Not at all. So there is the issue of how you manage your rent as opposed to the yo-yo in prices. But I do believe that the factors underlying growth since the turn of the century are still there. But that is why it is important to have policy consistency, to keep the discipline, not to throw it away simply because times are difficult. That's what I can say, but we leave others to the journalists. In fact, there was one who wrote in 2000 about the hopeless continent, and then 3 years later, the same journalist was writing about the rising continent. So let's leave it to them, but let's keep to the analysis and the kind of things we have to do, not simply governments, academia, private sector, to ensure that we keep momentum. Finally, again, coming back to the center, the Koreans, they were starting their transformation. So to answer the question of the Vice Chancellor, they created an institute called the Korea Development Institute, the KDI. Vice Chancellor, I want to ask you to take a look at it. In fact, at the bank with Louis, we started a program every year or 2 years. We would take African ministers to Korea. And together with the KDI, we would sit throughout to work through the experience of their countries. Ministers from different sectors. Not to copy, but to learn. So, I'm hoping that the Mutebile Institute could bring us closer somewhat to something like KDI, the African version. But your question as to whether we are investing enough in education, I'm sure we can do more, but I have a different concern. A different concern that when I was in the bank, research was done, I think, in 2 West African countries to find that while enrollments had increased, there were more children in school. Learning outcomes were very, very poor. That too was a fact. So there's a question of investing more, but especially investing in learning outcomes, not simply in getting numbers there. And number 2, I think you mentioned something which is extremely important, the missing middle. So you have got an ophthalmologist trained at Mulago, but no one to make glasses. We have to import glasses from abroad. So along the chain all the way down, the investment in education will have to go back to do things which all industrial countries have done. We don't all have to go to universities, but we all have to invest in outcomes which build an industrial base. Now, very finally, Vice Chancellor, I'm sure you know this, all over the world, people are rethinking education and the way it is delivered. But you are an expert on this. I'm not sure that in this country we can afford to send people to university at $50,000 a person. I'm not even certain that we can afford half of that. So I'm involved in an experience, what they call the African Leadership University. We're trying to experiment whether it is possible to provide higher education of the future at a cheaper price for more African children. I'm hoping that leading university like yours, because Makerere is among the very, very best, that there is a thinking there about what is the best way to provide education to more children, which is cost effective and which is for tomorrow's labor market.
Thanks, Doctor. I must mention the other panelists will have a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds much later to conclude. But I've been granted.
Coming soon on NTV.
On this very stage last season stood 20 contestants, real people with real stories, whose NSSF benefits changed their lives forever for the better.
This year, the stories are even more powerful. 16 new contestants with 16 new inspirational stories will grace this very same stage for a bigger and better Season 2 of the NSSF Friends with Benefits show.
And the best part of this show is you, the viewer, gets to vote for your top 3 contestants who will win a combined total of 55 million shillings.
From the 21st of January 2018,